So much drama. Nikon have just released their Z7 and Z6 camera lineup, and my god, the level of drama is just ridiculous. It's unbearable. I get it. I've seen the game enough times. I realize this is the way it goes, whether we're talking phones or cameras or computers. There's always this cycle of reaction. Something gets announced, there's a whole bunch of hype leading up to it. Some people are super pumped when it comes out, other people are disappointed, and then people are polarized and people are throwing rocks and pointing out flaws and speculating about what's going to be wrong with it, speculating what's going to be perfect about it. And then in time, it actually gets in people's hands. The dust settles, we see what's good, we see what's what, we see what's not great about it. And then devotees of the brand, they forgive some of the problems and they buy it anyway. Fanboys just can't see any problems and think it's the best thing that's ever come out. Haters can only see the problems, and then reasonable people see the pros and the cons and see that no device is perfect and then make an informed decision about whether or not they want it. It's all good. That's just how it goes. I get it. And it's hype and it's drama that sells column inches or fills blog posts that, people need to get people reading and keep the conversation going for as long as possible. That's all fine. Now, I have to say, this is not a video in defense of the Z series of cameras. There's plenty of stuff not to like about them. I've not even touched one. I'm going off the spec sheet as well. But there's a couple of things that really get on my nerves, and all three of them have been hit in the last few days. We're talking about this new line of cameras. Often by commenters just copy and pasting their flyby comments onto every video they can find, but also by people in the press who really, it surprises me that they would even talk in this way. So, the three things that really piss me off, the first one is when people just completely lose all context or sense of history of what's come before a product and just focusing on tiny little aspects to clickbait people, to get them in and want to just think about things in a polarizing way of this is the best, this is the worst, rather than giving any kind of nuanced view about it. The second thing, and this is much more common and much more annoying for me, is when people, it can be commenters, but often it's the press, just generalize whole groups of photographers as having exactly the same needs. We're not a market research group, so you can't talk about sports photographers all need this, or wedding photographers all need this, or even more stupidly, all photographers need something, or all pro photographers need something. The third one is about the pro thing. It's just a stupid term to generalize all pro photographers as needing any kind of certain aspect. There's people who shoot close-ups of macro objects for magazines. There's people who do wedding ring shots. There's people who do weddings. There's people who shoot animals. There's people who do underwater. There's people who do catalog work. There's people who do all kinds of different stuff. There's people who lead photo tours. What suits one pro isn't necessarily going to work for all of the rest of us. So when people throw out there that the Z series cameras aren't pro because they only have one card and no pro would shoot with only one card, it just shows complete ignorance or not, like short-term memory loss or something, because it's just stupid to talk that way. First of all, pros probably know what they want and need. These articles aren't aimed at them. It's a way of segmenting the market for magazines or the industry to talk about users as being enthusiasts or beginners or pros and segmenting us out. But saying that all of us that are earning money from our photography need any one factor is nonsense. And the flip side of that is that by segmenting it up in that way, people who are just starting out, who are looking up and seeing what has been labeled as suitable for this kind of work or suitable for that kind of work, are really being misled, because a lot of people, so a sports photographer who's shooting motocross might really value having 10 frames a second, dual cards, big battery life, and ... But then a sports photographer who's shooting cricket or golf might value really long lenses or a really short shutter lag, or. It depends on who they are, what they're shooting, and how they like to shoot. Two golf photographers or two different surf photographers may have completely different shooting styles. One might still be shooting on an old film camera and the other on a drone, and another using long lenses and fast DSLRs or mirrorless cameras. It's not one size fits all. So when people come out and say one card slot cannot be used for pro work, I'm scratching my head. On one hand, I get it. If you are doing work that's generating money and you want the insurance policy, having a second card slot absolutely is a great idea. But saying that it can't be used for pro work is just naive. So that means that no pro shoots with Leica or Phase 1. They're not always tethered, and they both only have a single card slot. And I guess no pro shot digital for the first few years when pretty much every camera only had one card slot. The Nikon D700 wasn't a pro camera. No pro work must have been shot with any Sony Alpha camera before the Sony A9, because they were all single card slots as well. Or what about every Red video camera user? Or for that matter, just about every videographer. I'm currently filming on one card. You could argue that this is pro work by some definition. People who are using an external video recorder, great, but often the camera will shut down the internal recording, so a lot of videographers that are using digital are only ever recording to one card. That means they're not pros either, right? Ugh, it's nonsense. Here's the question. Do you want two card slots in your camera? Yes? Fine. The Z series cameras, Z6 and Z7 aren't for you. They only have one. If you need two, keep shopping. But you can't say that single card means it's not suitable for pro work. You can, however, say that most high-end digital cameras these days have dual card slots, and a lot of people are going to be disappointed that the Z6 and 7 at their point in the market and their price don't. You can't even really generalize it to all high-end digital cameras though, because Leica and Phase 1. So we could say that the majority of full frame, non-medium format, non-rangefinder, so the majority of full frame DSLR or mirrorless cameras are shooting with dual card slots now, except for the flagship Sony Video Alpha camera, the A7S II, which is still one card slot as well, but then no one's using that for pro work, are they? I'm certain, however, the fact is that much more data is lost by human error than by card corruption and not having a backup, because the number of people that I see who are shooting with dual cards but using the second card slot as overflow, or shooting RAW to the main card and compressed small JPEG to the second card, it's not like they're getting a complete backup. Certainly having a JPEG in reserve if your main card failed is one thing, but think about that a lot of the slots that are put into cameras, the second card slot is hampered. You've got a fast card slot in card 1, it might be CF or XQD, and then the second one is SD, or if it's dual SD, it's often UHS2 in the first card slot and a slower format in the second. So I don't know that manufacturers are even expecting you pros who have to have a duplicate of everything are going to be shooting the same format to each of the cards anyway. And on that point, again, this is not a defense of the Nikon's decision with the Z6 and 7. I personally would much prefer it had two card slots, in case I haven't made that clear. But looking at where we are right now, if we are having a camera that only has one card slot, I personally would much prefer XQD than SD. I've had a lot of SD cards break, I've had others corrupt, and I've personally never had that happen with an XQD. It's kind of a catch-22. They're much more expensive and there's less manufacturers out there, but that also means there's a lot less fake and really crap ones out there. SDs are also flimsy and will often break. Having said that, I would still prefer to have two card slots in this. So I guess some of the difficulty comes from how are we defining pro? Is that anyone who makes money with their photography? And we're not having a context about it. We're not looking back and seeing that it really wasn't that long ago that dual card slots wasn't the mainstream. Yes, absolutely now. If by pro we're talking about wedding photographers or people shooting an event that only has one opportunity to catch it, if you have in the market options that have two card slots where you're able to get the data down fast enough on both of them, I would absolutely recommend, and for myself, choose to use that and have the second card as redundancy in case one of the cards corrupted. No question. But you can't say that one card is not suitable for pro work. pretty much everyone flying drones for commercial purposes, Leica, Phase 1, all the things I've just said, there's a lot of commercial work in the past has been done on, God forbid, film that you never had a backup, or in early digital and even through to now that's still being shot on single card slots. So if you're a pro, you know what you want most likely, and you've either put in your pre-order or you haven't. If you're newer to the market and you're listening to all this hype and seeing that this new high-end camera only has one card slot and therefore it's an amateur camera, well, just think about pro and amateur are just wide labels that don't describe anyone. Look at a feature set of any camera and see if it has the frames per second, the image quality, the resolution, the dynamic range, the handling, all the different features that might be relevant for the kind of shooting you're doing, and if it meets your budget, and if you've got lenses to work with it, and make an informed decision that way. So the simple question then is, do you require for your work 2 card slots? If yes, don't consider the Nikon Z6 and 7, they don't meet your needs. But don't generalize it to say that no one should be shooting professional work on a camera with only 1 card slot, unless you're going to go and tell that again to everyone who's shooting on a Phase 1, an A7S2, or Leica M camera. It's up to the individual. And terms like pro are just muddying the water and really don't help the conversation at all. Let me know your thoughts.